Good evening, and welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host, and we're diving into a complex geopolitical story that connects multiple continents and reveals the shifting power dynamics of our world. For the next 12 minutes, we'll be analyzing a dramatic incident in the Mediterranean, tracing its threads to East Africa, and examining what it tells us about the global order in 2026. Our top story, the French Navy, reportedly acting on intelligence from the United Kingdom, has seized a Russian oil tanker in international waters. This is a direct, provocative act between major powers, and the implications ripple far beyond the warm waters of the Mediterranean. To understand this, we need to look at three interconnected narratives: the ongoing shadow war between the West and Russia, Africa's complex and often contradictory role in global conflicts, and the quiet but intense competition between established alliances and emerging blocs. Let's begin with the seizure itself. According to initial reports from intelligence-linked channels, a French naval vessel intercepted and boarded the Russian-flagged tanker, the Kremlin Star, approximately 50 nautical miles north of the Libyan coast. The stated reason, according to unnamed Western officials, is a violation of international sanctions related to the financing of Russia's military operations. But the location is key. The central Mediterranean is a strategic choke point for energy flows from the Middle East and North Africa to Europe. This isn't just about one ship, it's about controlling a corridor. The operation, allegedly led by UK intelligence, signifies a continued aggressive Western posture towards Moscow, even as the conflict in Ukraine enters its fifth year. It represents a maritime extension of the economic war. But here's where the story takes a turn towards Africa, and specifically our region. Because while Western navies intercept Russian assets, individual Africans are fighting on the front lines of that very same conflict. We have obtained and verified a chilling video, shared just days ago on January 20th, 2026. It shows a Kenyan national, in full Russian army combat gear, speaking from a bunker on the Ukrainian front. His voice is tense as he describes the battlefield reality. He says, and I quote, "I am in a danger zone, you can hear gunshots. There are like 50 drones scanning, and if it sees you..." The video cuts out, but the message is clear. This Kenyan is part of a growing, though often unspoken, phenomenon: foreign fighters in the Russian ranks, drawn by financial incentives or ideological alignment against what they perceive as Western hegemony. His presence there creates a stark paradox. On one hand, you have the French Navy, representing a traditional Western power, seizing Russian property. On the other, you have a citizen from a nation historically within the Western sphere of influence, Kenya, taking up arms for Russia. This isn't a simple binary. It speaks to a fragmentation of loyalties and a search for new patrons in a multipolar world. This brings us to our second major point, the African context. The sentiment expressed by that Kenyan soldier finds echoes in political frustrations across the continent. Look at Uganda. This month, President Yoweri Museveni was declared the winner of a general election, securing his seventh term in power after 40 years. For Uganda's youth, who make up over 78% of the population under 35, this result is a devastating blow to hopes for change. One young Ugandan voter told The Guardian, "We need change, not just as young people, but as a country." They fear a future defined by stagnation and unemployment. This disillusionment with entrenched, long-serving leaders, many of whom have maintained power with varying degrees of Western acquiescence during the War on Terror era, is creating fertile ground for alternative alliances. When domestic political avenues seem closed and economic prospects dim, the appeal of external powers offering different models or direct support grows. Russia, through its Wagner Group legacy and now more formal military recruitment, has positioned itself as that alternative, anti-colonial, pragmatic, and unburdened by lectures on democracy. But it's not just Russia. The broader framework is the rise of blocs like BRICS, which India is chairing this very year, 2026. Recently, the French foreign minister noted the symbolic passing of the baton, France heading the G7, India chairing BRICS. This is the diplomatic front of the same struggle. BRICS, expanded to include powers like Egypt, Ethiopia, and Saudi Arabia, represents a concerted effort to build a financial and political architecture outside of Western control. For African nations, membership or partnership offers potential leverage, alternative sources of investment, and a louder voice on the global stage. The risk, of course, is becoming a pawn in a larger game, which brings us back to the Mediterranean seizure. France's action can be read in two ways. First, as a straightforward enforcement of sanctions. Second, and more strategically, as a demonstration of resolve. It's a message to Russia: your reach, even into global energy markets, can be challenged. But it's also a subtle message to the global south and to fellow European nations. The traditional powers still have the capability and will to police the global commons. They are reminding everyone who built the current system of rules. Yet, the effectiveness of such demonstrations is now in question, because the world is watching through a different lens. And that lens brings us to our third angle: perception and diplomatic theater. Just last week at the Davos summit, all eyes were on French President Emmanuel Macron, but not only for his words. While delivering a stern rebuke of US President Donald Trump's threat to tariff European countries, Macron wore a striking pair of blue reflective aviator sunglasses. Indoors, he offered no explanation. Was it a medical reason, a fashion statement, or was it a calculated gesture? In the age of viral imagery, every detail is a signal. To some analysts, the sunglasses projected an image of cool, detached authority, a shield against the glare of scrutiny. To others, it seemed oddly confrontational in a setting built on open dialogue. This incident, small as it may seem, is part of the story. Leadership in 2026 is as much about narrative and symbol as it is about naval deployments. Macron's shades and the seized tanker are two sides of the same coin, the performance of power in an increasingly skeptical world. Now, let's talk hard numbers and direct consequences. The seizure of the Kremlin Star will have immediate economic repercussions. While we lack specific figures for this tanker, we can extrapolate from the market. A standard Aframax tanker like the one likely seized can carry around 750,000 barrels of oil. At current prices, that's a cargo worth approximately $60 million. But the real impact is on insurance and shipping costs. Following a high-profile seizure in a major shipping lane, risk premiums for vessels operating in the Mediterranean, especially those with any Russian links, could skyrocket. Some analysts project an increase of up to 200% for war risk insurance in the region following an incident of this magnitude. That cost gets passed on, affecting global energy prices. Furthermore, this action tests the fragile consensus in Europe. The operation was French on UK intelligence. But what is the position of Germany or Italy, who rely heavily on maritime energy imports? A unilateral move can create diplomatic friction. Meanwhile, Russia's response will be critical. They could retaliate asymmetrically, perhaps a show of force naval exercise off the coast of a French overseas territory, or a cyber attack on French port infrastructure. Or they could leverage their African partnerships, applying pressure on states where France has economic or security interests, like in the Sahel. This is where the Kenyan soldier's video becomes more than a human interest story. It is a piece of Russian strategic messaging, demonstrating depth of commitment and global reach into unexpected places. It says, "Your citizens see value in our cause." For Kenya, this presents a delicate dilemma. The government has traditionally maintained a neutral, pro-sovereignty stance on Ukraine. The confirmed presence of a Kenyan citizen fighting for Russia forces Nairobi into a difficult position. Does it condemn his actions, potentially angering a powerful partner that has growing influence on the continent? Or does it remain silent, risking its relationships with Western allies who provide significant development aid and investment? This is the tightrope many African nations now walk. The old playbook of non-alignment is getting harder to execute when the lines of conflict are drawn through your own population. Finally, we must consider the American dimension. President Donald Trump, now in his second term, has championed an America First foreign policy that is often transactional and skeptical of multilateral interventions. His recent threat to tariff European allies over the Greenland dispute shows a willingness to pressure traditional friends. How does his administration view the French seizure? On one hand, Trump has consistently praised strong, unilateral action. He might see it as France finally pulling its weight against a mutual adversary. On the other hand, he is deeply critical of actions that could destabilize markets or increase energy prices for American consumers. His response will be a key indicator of Western solidarity. Furthermore, the other news item we're tracking, the dismissal of charges against commentator Don Lemon for a past protest, highlights the intense domestic political battles in the U.S. that often distract from or directly influence foreign policy. The administration's bandwidth for a nuanced response to a Mediterranean naval incident may be limited. So where does this leave us? The seizure of the Russian tanker is not an isolated event. It is a node in a vast and tangled web. It connects to the trenches of Ukraine via a Kenyan soldier's smartphone. It connects to the political despair of Ugandan youth. It connects to the symmetry of BRICS and the symbolic gestures at Davos. In this multipolar era, power is exercised through navies, through narratives, through economic blocs, and through the recruitment of global citizens. The Mediterranean has been a crossroads of empires for millennia. Today, it is a stage for the 21st century's great game. The French move is bold, but it may also be a reflection of anxiety, an attempt to assert a fading primacy. The response from Moscow, from Beijing, from New Delhi, and from capitals across Africa will define what comes next. One thing is certain, the world is not splitting into two clean blocks. It is fracturing into a mosaic of interests, where a nation can have a citizen in a Russian bunker one day and negotiate a trade deal with the EU the next. For Kenya and for Africa, the challenge is to navigate this complexity without being torn apart by it, to find agency in a world where the great powers are once again on the move. The seizure of the Kremlin star is just the first scene in a much longer drama. We will be watching closely. Subscribe to Kenya News Update today for continuing coverage.